Hello and welcome back to her Hoop Stats Unplugged. As always, you're here with Megan Gauer, and we are kicking off our first show in quite a while with our 2022-2023 NCAA season preview. If you've been with us for a long time, you might have noticed that we kind of took the summer off. We're going to be transitioning to being a bit more of a college basketball podcast on Unplugged, so focusing on the college season, which is already right around the corner. It's October, and the season will be here before we know it. So to kick that off, we are back with our annual season preview episode, 2 parts, deep diving into a lot of the teams, players that we're going to see this season, some of our thoughts on those ahead of everything tipping off in just a few short weeks. And to do that, I am joined today by Calvin Wetzel from our Hoop Stats team. Hey, Calvin, how's it going?
I'm good, Megan. How are you doing?
Doing good. Excited to be back. Excited to be talking about another NCAA season. I'm not really sure how we're here already, but we are.
Yeah, it's always so much fun. This first podcast that we do, it's like that's when I know like college basketball season is right around the corner. When we do this podcast, it's like my first shift from like WNBA, whatever else I was doing over the summer. Now it's college basketball season, so I'm hyped.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm definitely excited to be back. I've taken quite the break this summer. I was trying to find my mic, and it was like in the bottom of my bag that I brought to the Final Four. So that's how my summer's been. But yeah, excited to be back. I had to turn the heat on today, so that means the college basketball season is getting here. It is officially fall, and it is almost right around the corner. I think just over a month out. We're recording this in the beginning of October. You'll hear it a little bit later, so we'll be less than a month out when you're hearing this, but it's very exciting to be back.
Yeah, I actually turned my heat on today too, so you're right. That's another sign.
Official start.
Exactly. The signs are popping up everywhere.
Well, for those of you that have listened to our preview episodes before, we kind of go over a bunch of different things. We try to cover as much as we can in a reasonable amount of time. So we're going to do something similar this year in our, third. Is it our third annual preview?
I think so.
Yeah,
third, fourth.
Yeah, third. If it's fourth, it actually might be the fourth, which is crazy. Anyway, here we are. So yeah, 4th annual preview episode. We're gonna run through a bunch of different things, all Americans, some teams that we think are underrated and overrated going into the season. Final Four picks, of course, which I'm sure we'll be probably horribly wrong on come actual March. So I feel like maybe at least one of those teams, I think we probably will both get right, and then talk about some mid-majors and, of course, what games in that first week of the season we are most excited for as well. So lots on the agenda. So diving into who some of those potential All-American players are this season, I feel like this year is interesting because when you start going back and looking at last year's list of All-Americans, a lot of these players are still in college basketball. So a lot of names on this list are almost a little bit easy to put there because you can kind of assume that some of those same names are going to be back this season, but I think probably some new players to throw on there as well. Always a few things that are going to get interesting, but to start it off, Calvin, do you have any takes on kind of like first team players? Maybe we could just start from the top of our first teams. I feel like we probably both have one player on the top of that list. That's a pretty obvious pick.
Yeah, well, I actually didn't even go as far to pick any second or third team. So if you get to that, you put me on a spot here. But with first team, like you said, you just want my top one?
Yeah, let's just start there.
Well, yeah, that's pretty boring. Aaliyah Boston. No hot takes there. I don't know if we've had a bigger lock in quite a while for first team All-American. She's obviously the front runner for National Player of the Year again. Team's front runner for the national championship again. So I don't know, snooze. But I'm assuming you're right there with me.
Yeah, exactly. I guess no real excitement there, and no disrespect to the South Carolina fans that we're probably not going to elaborate on that one too much. It's just, I think actually, it's pretty obvious that Aaliyah Boston's going to be there.
High level of respect, actually. She's like so much of a lock that there's like nothing else to say. She's just the best player, like period, full stop.
Yeah, exactly. Not much to say there at all. So yeah, I think that was pretty obvious too. Who else do you have on that first team, though? Maybe we just go one by one.
Yeah, my next couple are also like sort of boring, and then we get a little bit more interesting. I didn't get anything crazy, I don't think, but I went with Caitlin Clark next. I think she's another one that's pretty close to a lock. Last year it was a big National Player of the Year debate. I was on the Aaliyah Boston side of that, as obviously we're over 50% of people. But Caitlin Clark was the next best player who had a case, I think. So I think she's right up there in the number 2 spot.
Yeah, she's second on my list as well. I think another one that's just kind of a no-brainer. We've seen what she's been able to do for Iowa the last 2 seasons. I don't expect that to change at all this season. If anything, she's going to be better. So I think another player that's just a very obvious pick that's probably going to land on that first team All-Americans this season.
Yeah, no question. Who you got third?
Haley Jones. So another, I feel like fairly obvious pick as well. Coming out of Stanford. I feel like they really have a kind of a 1-2 in Haley Jones and then Cameron Brink. And I could see maybe if Haley Jones could fall off that first team, if Cameron Brink moves on to it. That's really the only way I see Haley Jones not being a lock as a first team All-American, but kind of talking about those two teams, I mean, I still think Stanford's going to be one of the best teams in the country, and the two of them are going to be the reason why. So I'm pretty confident that at least one of them is going to be a full first team All-American come March.
Yeah, I had Haley Jones third as well, so we're pretty lockstep here. I actually had Cameron Brink fourth. I do think Stanford has a very good shot at getting 2 first-team All-Americans. With Cameron Brink, obviously less of a sure thing than probably those top 3. And if I would say if Stanford has one, it's going to be Haley Jones. I could see Brink on the second team maybe. But when you look at Cameron Brink's first 2 seasons, like she has some remarkable efficiency numbers, as good as anyone in the country. She just played barely over 20 minutes a game in her first 2 years, partially due to foul trouble, partially due to, especially her freshman year, sort of being a little bit raw still. But really, like, the foul trouble thing is overblown. I think she's averaged 2.8 fouls per game exactly in each of her first 2 seasons. Why not let her get 4 fouls a game? Just let her go out there, get 25 to 30 minutes. And I think we're going to see that this year in year 3. And the numbers that she's going to put up, if she gets even 25 minutes a game, let alone 30, are going to be eye-popping. So free Cameron Brink. I've said that before. Let's see what she can do with maybe top 2 or 3 minutes on the team. It's incredible. I love those players. I think some people know this about me, who block shots and hit threes. That's like my favorite combo in all of basketball. That's who Cameron Brink is at a super high level. So I'm really excited to see what she can do. And I think she has a very good shot at actually cracking that top 5.
Yeah, I would agree with that, especially because I think Stanford has lost some of their depth with the amount of graduations that they lost last year, and they have to change their look a little bit going into this season. So a natural way to do that is, I think, going to be giving Cameron Brink more minutes. And like you said, she can block shots and she can hit the 3, so you can still space the floor with her in a big lineup. So you can have her and Haley Jones and Fran Bully be out there together if you want to, and it's not going to create too much congestion in the paint. So I do agree. I think we're going to see more from Cameron Brink this year. And if she gets that time, I would be shocked to see her not be putting up big numbers. That said, I did not have Cameron Brink in my top 4. I have her at the top of my second team just because I do think it's going to be hard for any team to really have 2 All-Americans this year. Not to say that they couldn't. It's just this early on, I feel like that's hard to predict. So at 4, I have AZ Fudd, which is maybe a little bit of a hot take in just that she's one of these players that wasn't an All-American last year. I think we've got so many returners that a lot of that first team looks like returners, but I think UConn is still going to have a really solid team. And I also think we just haven't seen what AZ Fudd can do at the college level yet. I think we saw it in bursts last year, but she struggled with injuries for most of the season. She's going to have to take a bigger role for the Huskies with Paige Beckers being out. And I think all the hype that she had coming in to the college game still came from somewhere. And that if she's healthy and we see that this season, she could easily end up in that kind of first team All-American type season.
Yeah, well, it's not apparently so hot that I actually had AZ Fudd as my 5th. So maybe we're both going spicy. I don't know. I mean, as you know, I'm extremely UConn biased. You know me. So had to put a UConn player in the top 5. But in all seriousness, all the points you brought up, I had written down as well. Higher usage, Ball's going to be in her hands. Obviously, incredible talent. And people always talk about this, throw this phrase around in a lot of different sports, like sophomore slump. I don't know where that comes from. To me, I feel like not just in AZ's case, just in like general sports, I feel like the correct phrase we should be using is sophomore jump, because I feel like I feel like that's the biggest, by the time you get to year 4, or obviously with COVID and transfers, a lot of people in year 5 at this point in college basketball, you sort of know what you're going to get from a player. Every once in a while, you see a player take that huge leap, late in their career. But most of the time, I think year 2 is when you see the biggest improvement year over year. And we're going to see that with AZ this year, both in terms of just her talent and also obviously opportunity. You have to have both of those go together to really kind of make that leap into that first tier, that top 5 All-American. I think she's going to have that this year.
Yeah, exactly. I think so as well. I would be kind of surprised if she's not in the first or at least second team conversation when we get to March. So I do expect to see that big jump from her. I think it's something that's been true at UConn for a long time too, is players tend to make a big jump between their freshman and sophomore seasons. And I think a player at the caliber of AZ, I think you can expect that. In my 5th spot, I have another actually Big East player, so double Big East players in the top 5. But Anissa Morrow, coming off a freshman year where she was just a walking double-double. I think it was over 30. I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head. Double-doubles in her freshman season. And like you said, sophomore jump, no reason to expect she's going to do anything differently this year. Quite frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if her numbers are bigger this year, just considering what DePaul has lost, and that more of that weight is probably going to be on her shoulders to carry that team. So I think a player that you're just going to see put up some pretty insane numbers this year that are going to land her a first team All-American spot.
I like that one a lot. I think I've told some people this before, but the thing that just stands out to me about Anissa Morrow is last year, every time there was a player averaging some crazy stat line, and I would use the Her Hoop Stats research tool to go in and type, all the filters, so how many people are averaging this stat line that this player is averaging. It was always like, without fail, it was the player I looked up and Anissa Morrow. It was like these 2 players are the only 2 players in the country averaging whatever it was. But it was never like this player is the only one averaging XYZ, because it was always Anissa Morrow averaging the same thing. Like, it didn't matter the stat, she was in there. So yeah, and that was as a freshman at DePaul.
Yeah.
It blows my mind. So yeah, absolutely, I think she's in that conversation as well. Second team minimum for me. I would have her on my second team, but very good shot to, if I'm wrong about my first team, I think she might be one of the first ones who would make me wrong.
Yeah, definitely. Right. One more player to mention that maybe not on either of our first team lists, but I think is definitely going to be kind of in that conversation for first team. Definitely a second team selection this year is Elizabeth Kitley out of Virginia Tech as well. Another player that was an All-American last year. I think Virginia Tech is going to be a really solid team this year. We'll get to more on that later, but I think she's someone that's definitely needs to be in this kind of like conversation as part of that potential first team group.
Absolutely. And Virginia Tech, by the way, is going to have maybe their best season ever. So look out for them.
Yes. Well, I think we'll definitely be talking about that at another point in this episode.
Yeah, a little teaser.
Yes.
You can just throw out a few more names if you want for second team. Someone like Haley Van Lith, maybe be on the radar.
Yeah.
Saya Cook, Monica Sonano, Maddie Segrist. Just names that are popping in my head right now.
Yeah.
Didn't really write down too many notes, but names that I think could be in that conversation for second team.
Yeah, definitely. I also have Olivia Miles on that list, Rory Harmon out of Texas, who coming off of a really strong freshman season, Ashley Jones as well. So a lot of big names out there that we have kind of seen in that conversation last year that are going to be a part of the conversation this year as well.
Yeah, no, those are 3 good ones too. Rory Harmon, I think, is another little teaser. I'm going to talk about her in a little bit. But Olivia Miles, by the way, I'm just going to shamelessly plug. It's not out yet. I don't know when we're dropping this podcast. It might be out by then, but I talked to Olivia Miles a couple weeks ago. We were just watching film together, and she kind of broke down all the different reads she's making as a point guard and everything. Like, when I tell you she is an absolute genius, like brilliant, off the charts IQ. Like, I learned so much just about the game and the sport of basketball from talking about Olivia Miles, from talking to Olivia Miles. So look out for that at some point. Just interview with her and watch her play this year, because she is next level.
Yeah, I think definitely one of the most exciting players on the list of like players to watch this season, just especially like what she was able to do in some of Notre Dame's tournament run last year, really throughout the season for Notre Dame last year, making that jump to the next level this coming season, I'm sure. So I'm really excited to see where she can take the Irish team this year.
Yeah, a tournament triple-double, I think, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. I
Yes.
believe, yeah.
So yeah, I watched her in person against NC State when Notre Dame lost that game, but just really impressive to watch her play in person. So if you have a chance to get out and see her in person this year, would highly recommend that.
I hope to.
So we're getting into now my favorite section of this podcast, I think, the underrated, overrated section, where we talk about teams that we think are underrated, teams we think are overrated. We don't actually officially have an AP poll as we're recording this, so underrated, overrated is in terms of like some of the really easy, really early polls from ESPN or just the general, I think, chatter on the internet so far about a lot of these teams and where people are kind of tending to rank them. I guess no official to be like, oh, this team is ranked 20th and they should be ranked 5th or anything like that, being we don't have an AP polling quite yet, but we'll have that soon. But I think a lot of teams that we can talk about here, and I'm going to start out with one that is probably going to get a few eye rolls from bringing it up as a underrated team, but I do have UConn on this list, and not from the perspective that like UConn can really be an underrated team with the amount of like attention they get, but because I think people are maybe putting too much emphasis on the Paige Bueckers injury. They're without Paige Bueckers for the year. That's obviously a huge blow to this team. I think we're talking about a team that with Bueckers would have probably been a 1A, 1B with South Carolina going into the season. I do think that obviously takes a hit to where they're going into the season, but it's a team that still has a lot of talent and could, I think, still very well be a Final Four type team. And I think that's where they're getting a little underrated and that they're not maybe necessarily getting that level of respect heading into the season. You still have Azzi Fudd. You still have Aaliyah Edwards. You have Caroline Ducharme, who had a great freshman season. They have Aubrey Griffin back from injury. They've got a really solid recruiting class. And I think this is a team that if the players that they need to step up, make the right kind of steps forward, could be a really, really strong team this season.
Yeah, well, like you said, it's without the AP poll, we kind of have to ask ourselves like underrated by who or overrated by who. Like, it's not they're not underrated by the poll yet. I mean, I don't know if UConn's going to be underrated by ESPN. They will definitely be underrated by South Carolina fans. So you have that for sure. My first one, actually, both my underrated teams are kind of the same theme. Teams that maybe lost a lot and. Well, like you said, UConn loses Paige Bueckers, right? And maybe people are going to overrate that impact. And both of mine are teams that, not injury, just based on transfers or graduation, lost a lot. And I think maybe people are going to overrate the impact of their losses and therefore underrate the team. The first one is Maryland. Maryland obviously had a lot going on this offseason, a lot of transfers. And that's nothing new for them. They lost Ashley Owusu, Angel Reese, Mimi Collins. That's a lot of talent. Don't get me wrong. The team's going to look very different. But I mean, we've seen this before. We had the same conversation when Maryland lost Taylor Mikesell. We had the same conversation when Maryland lost Shakira Austin. And they still just continue to find ways to be that top 10 caliber program. They still have Diamond Miller. Sounds like she should be healthy this year. Cheyenne Sellers, I think, is going to be another one of those sophomores we talk about, sophomore jump, breakout year. And then Lavender Briggs, who they had as a transfer from Florida. She is going to be an absolute baller if you're unfamiliar with her. So they still got a lot on their roster. I mean, Brenda Fries every year seems to be able to make up for these losses with these transfers out of the program. It says a lot about her on the court as a coach that she's able to do that. It says a lot about her that she has to do that too. I don't know what else to say about that. Probably don't want to get into it, but you can read the reports and the tweets all for yourself. But all of that stuff aside, just purely from an on-court perspective, I still think Maryland has the pieces to be an extremely high-level winning basketball program. And I'm not sure if they're going to be ranked as such right away entering the season.
Yeah, I'm kind of going to disagree with you here because I think you're right that they did bring in a lot of good pieces to replace what they lost, but I just don't think the pieces that they have brought in really replaced the caliber of what they did lose to transfers this season. And I think this is a team that maybe is going to be struggle a little bit more than whatever their preseason ranking is going to apply. I think ESPN still had them pretty high despite the transfers in their like way too early top 25. I'm gonna get to a full take on the Big Ten in a few minutes, but it's not a team I'm super high on going into the season. I think they're a team that's going to do well in the polls based on name recognition and those names that they've brought in early on, but I do think it's a team that's going to struggle this year.
Yeah, well, to be fair, you're right that they did not bring in the just level of individual talent that they lost. And I don't know if they'll be quite as good as they were last year. I just think that this is a team that it's a program, not a team. It's a program that is able to sort of make up for those lack of or loss of talent sometimes just by the way that they play. And especially, I think later in the season when you see, maybe in November, they play a really tough schedule and some of those new pieces are trying to gel and they're trying to figure out who they are with the different roster. And we see them drop a couple games, but I think they're going to be right there in that conversation come March, just because of the way that Brenda Freese runs this program and the way that they play together. And, like I said, I don't know if she runs the program actually very well overall, but it's on the court she does. I think that's fair to say.
Yes.
I'll leave it at that. And I think to your point about ESPN, I think they're ranked 16, 17, 18. I don't have it in front of me. It was somewhere in that range, way too early, which was like from June. So it was way too early and it's already out of date. But I think they're top 10. So to me, if it's 18, if it's 17, to me, that's going to be too low. And I think we're going to be looking at that as too low in February. But maybe I'm wrong. I'm wrong all the time. So who knows? I like that we're disagreeing on something.
Yes.
Get a little heat going.
Yeah, we don't often disagree, I feel like, on this podcast. So it's always good to have something that we disagree. Yeah. Some people would say that we agree too much. That's fine.
Yeah, no, we need more of this stuff. More more talk show fodder or whatever it's called.
Well, yeah, sticking with my theme of disagreeing with you, I'm kind of going to expand that take that I have on Maryland to just the Big Ten as a whole. It's just, I don't think anyone's that surprised to hear me say this because it's not a conference I'm generally super high on because I don't think that you could win in like the grand scheme of things without playing defense. And that's a favorite trait of some of the Big Ten teams. But I just, in general, and this is where people are probably going to think I'm nuts, but I actually think that the Big East could be the better conference at the top than the Big Ten this season, which I realize a lot of people are probably like, what on earth are you talking about?
You got to define at the top before you go any further. You got to define at the top because obviously UConn is at the top and UConn can definitely be better than whoever's at the top of the Big Ten. So how deep we going with the top? We going top 2, top 3, top 5?
I'm talking like top 4 to 5 teams. So I just don't think like the bottom of the Big Ten is going to beat out the bottom of the Big East. Unfortunately, just those teams at the bottom of the Big East have not made the leap that they need to. But I think at the top of the Big Ten, when you're talking about your Marylands, your Iowa, another team that I just think is incredibly overrated. I'm pretty sure they're like 6 in ESPN's way too early top 25. I know it's outdated. I know it's early, but I would fully expect that they're going to sit somewhere around there when the AP poll comes out. It's just they're not a top 6 team to me at all. Caitlin Clark is great. Her and Monica Zano together is great, but you have to play defense and you need more than that to be a top 6 team. Indiana, another team that took quite a bit of hits from their team last year, is going to have, I think, a climb this year to get back to the level that they were at. I actually think Nebraska is going to be one of the better teams in the Big Ten this year, but still a team that I think is maybe some Big East teams that could be on top of that. And then you've got Ohio State, Michigan, both teams also that have lost a lot. So, and then if you compare that to, obviously you have UConn in the Big East, and yes, UConn I think could easily be above all of these Big Ten teams. But then you have Creighton that made quite a bit of noise in the NCAA tournament last year. I think some people thought that was a fluke. That was the same Creighton team that was there all year. They just didn't get, I think, a lot of the attention that they should have last year. They probably will come into the season ranked nationally, I would expect, because of that. But a team that's just a really, really good basketball team that doesn't necessarily get the light of day on national television and maybe got overlooked. Villanova, Maddie Siegrist is going to be one of the top players in the country this year. It's a Villanova team that hasn't lost a whole lot, was pretty young last year. I think they're going to be really good. And you have Anissa Moore at DePaul. DePaul's got some stuff to figure out as well. Seton Hall is a program that's consistently pretty decent. So I really do think that you could be looking at the top of the Big East being better than the top of the Big Ten this year.
All right. At Megan Gauer, it's on the screen. I think if you're watching, if we put this clip out, I'm going to start with where I disagree with you, but you did bring up some good points, so I'll get to that. First off, I'll just put it this way: I do not think at any point, any week in this season, will the Big East have more ranked teams than the Big Ten.
Yes.
I'll define
probably
the top.
Fair. Should that be the case? I don't know.
Oh, okay. All right. Fair.
We can get into my opinions on the AP poll at a different time.
Yeah. Oh no, I have lots of opinions on the AP poll too, and it's definitely not the best way to measure the top 25 team. Well, all right. Let me rephrase it then. You're right. Good call out. I also don't think at any point during this year will we see more Big East teams than Big Ten teams in the top 25 of any other metric. Net, which also has a lot of flaws. Her Hoop Stats rating, Massey ratings, whatever you want to go down the list. I don't think there will be a day this season where more of the top 25 are from the Big East than the Big Ten. That being said, you're right. Creighton is an awesome team. They definitely should and will be ranked preseason top 25. They didn't get nearly enough love last year, all year, until they pulled that big upset. Villanova is going to be much improved, and they're not going to have to sneak into the tournament this year. They're going to be safely in because of Maddie Siegrist. I just think the Big Ten, okay, another point that you're right on, though. The Big Ten did lose a lot. They lost Naz Hillman. Indiana lost, 3 or 4 of their starters from that. The legendary last couple years was maybe two of the best years in Indiana history. They bring back, a few of those pieces, but lost a lot from that team. Nebraska, they're going to be a really good team again, like you said, but they did lose Sam Hyvee for the year to injury, which is huge. I hate that for them. It's a big blow. They still have a lot of pieces. Jazz Shelley is going to be one of the best players in the Big Ten. And by the way, shout out to Nebraska. They brought in one of the best assistant coaches in the country. Shout out to Jess Keller from Illinois State, who Nebraska hired, moving up in the world. So obviously, I'm going to be a big Cornhusker fan for as long as she's there. I already was. But you're right. The Big Ten lost a lot. Big East has some underrated teams, I think, from 2 through 5 or wherever you want to put it. Just don't know if it's going to be enough. I do think the gap will be a lot smaller than probably it has been in any year that, at least in my memory, between the top of the Big Ten and the top of the Big East. But to fully be better, that's bold. That's a bold claim. I like it, though. I don't agree with it, but I like you going out there, and I think we should clip and record this exact whole segment and come back, and one of us will be wrong, and whichever one of us we can roast on Twitter in February. We'll see. It might be me. I don't know, but I like going out there on a limb. That's a fun take. I don't know if it's a correct take. It might be, but it's a fun take.
It's definitely a hot take, that's for sure. Really, what it comes down to in my book is, I think both have 3 pretty clear top 25 teams this year. I think in the Big East, you've got UConn, Creighton, Villanova. Those 3 should be top 25 teams this year, I think. Maybe people don't agree with me on Villanova, but I think they should be a top 25 team.
I do.
Yeah, I think they're going to play their way into that spot if they're not there to start off. And then in the Big Ten, I think they're not the number 6 team in the country, but they'll still be a top 25 team. Maryland is still I don't think they're a top 10 team, but I still think they're a top 25 team. And then I think Nebraska is a top 25 team. I'm not sold that any of those other teams are top 25 teams in the Big Ten. And then I think that's where you start to get, I think they're at a similar level as a DePaul, as a Seton Hall, as those other teams in the Big East. So that's kind of where that's coming from.
All right. Well, I'm going to give you a team that if you're wrong, this is going to be why. It's going to be Ohio State. I think Ohio State is going to be ranked preseason, and I think they're going to be ranked all year. And if the top of the Big Ten is better than the top of the Big East, I think it's going to be because Ohio State exceeds your expectations and gives the Big Ten that extra team at the top.
Fair. I think that's probably the team I would say is the wild card there, because I don't think Indiana and Michigan have enough to replace what they lost to be in that conversation.
They did lose a lot. That's absolutely true.
Yeah, I just said their teams I don't see being great this year, unfortunately. All right.
Not Illinois? No love for Illinois?
I think me saying that Illinois is going to be a top 25 team is basically the same as me saying like Providence is going to be a top 25 team. We're not going to go that crazy.
Oh, no. I'm definitely joking with that one. But they did get a new coach. They brought in Shauna Green from Dayton, who's had a lot of success at Dayton.
Yes,
so
yes.
we'll see in a few years.
We'll see in a few years.
Yeah. Year one, though, no, not top 25.
All right. I'll let you give me another one now that I've spent 15 minutes with my wild hot takes here.
All right, that was fun. Megan texted me that she had a crazy take, by the way, like a month ago or whatever it was, and she wouldn't tell me what it was. So I'm glad to finally know. I've been on the edge of my seat for a long time. That was worth the wait. My other underrated team, though, along the same theme of teams that maybe lost a lot, and people are gonna overrate that, is Gonzaga. And of course, also mid majors are just kind of, at least in my opinion, underrated in general. And then Gonzaga, they've been top 15 in the Hoop Stats ratings 4 years in a row. They're always right there, at least borderline in the top 25, getting votes sometimes, maybe ranked in that tournament conversation. But they did lose a lot. They lost 4 starters, and they bring back the Trongs, the twins, everyone's favorite twins. But when you look at this team and kind of how they play and how they're composed, it's not a team that that's top heavy, that relies on 1 or 2 stars. It really hasn't been. So losing 4 starters for a team like this doesn't feel the same as, say, losing 4 starters for a team like Indiana, who we just talked about, who was so reliant on that starting lineup last year and had so much star power in that starting lineup with players like Ali Patberg, Grace Berger, go down the list. Gonzaga was so much. I mean, they didn't have anyone average 12 points a game. They had their whole starting lineup was 8 through 11. So to me, it's another team. It's a program. It's not just a team. It's a program that always finds a way. Like I said, they've been in the top 15 Hoop Stats ratings for 4 straight years. I don't know why that would change. They add Brenna Maxwell from Utah, power conference talent, obviously from the Pac-12. And I don't think they're going to be ranked preseason, because sometimes even when they actually, bring back a lot, they're still not ranked. And when you lose 4 starters from a team that was, I forget, an 8 or a 9 seed last year, they were in that 8-9 game. I don't see anyone ranking them. But to me, it's a mistake to have this team anywhere below 30th. I definitely think that they have at least a shot at top 25, and if not, should be one of the top teams getting votes. I don't know that they will be, but I think you look at what BYU lost as well. I think Gonzaga is going to be right there at the top of the WCC, right there in the tournament conversation again, and right there where they have been every year for the last 4, 5, 6 years. That's my other underrated team.
Yeah, no, definitely fair. I feel like it's pretty easy to be underrated as a mid-major because they're just always underrated. But yeah, agreed. A team that probably come March, they're going to be an NCAA tournament team, and someone you're probably going to be circling on your bracket as upset watch for whoever they're playing. All right. I have another underrated team as well. I guess my Big Ten take was that the Big Ten is overrated. So we did have one overrated team conference as a whole. But Virginia Tech, not that they are definitely getting some attention coming into the season. They bring back Kitley. They add Ashley Owusu, which I think is a huge addition. You've got really a big 1-2 punch there for this team. But I think a team that's going to win the ACC this year.
All right. That's another bold one, but I like it.
I
like that one better. That's my favorite one so far. I like that one better than the other one. That's a good one.
Yeah, I think that, and I also think Notre Dame is not necessarily underrated coming in, but a team that's going to be in the conversation for that ACC title. And this is my favorite section because I usually just use it to talk about everything. So also that I think that Louisville and NC State are a little bit overrated at the flip side coming in, probably considered the overall favorites to be at the top of the ACC, but both teams that lost a fair amount. I know that Louisville still has Haley Van Leef, but I think Emily Engstler was such a big part of what that team did last year, Kiana Smith. So I do think that they're going to have a trouble adjusting as well. So kind of, I think, a little bit of flip in who's on the top of the ACC this year.
Yeah, no, I love Virginia Tech. I'm all on the bandwagon, so I love that. I don't actually think I would literally pick them number one in the ACC, but I hope I'm wrong. I hope they do. They're definitely right there in that top tier, though, and I don't think the ACC has a clear front runner. I think the ACC has a top tier that's all pretty. It's not like the SEC where it's South Carolina and then everyone else in like the tier B. Like tier A is a big group in the ACC, so they definitely could. They're right there with NC State, who I agree is maybe a little bit overrated. Louisville, Notre Dame. I think North Carolina is going to be in that conversation too. Name we haven't said. I'll throw them in there. But yeah, I think you have a big top tier in Virginia Tech's right there. So I love the Virginia Tech love. Go Hogs.
Yeah. Yeah, I think an exciting team to watch this year. I don't know. I really wouldn't be surprised if they win the ACC. I actually kind of stand by that take. It's a little bit hot, but I don't think that it's that hot of a take.
No, I wouldn't be shocked either. I would put them, second or third, so and close enough to first that it wouldn't shock me at all.
Yeah.
I have an overrated team. Yeah, I got my two underrateds. This is one that I've picked against before, and people come at me on Twitter for it before, but gonna go right back to the well. Tennessee. I think Tennessee is a little bit overrated. Picked against them in the tournament the last couple of years. Tennessee Twitter hates that, so whatever. This team's great. I get it. Like they brought back a lot of talent. They struck gold in the transfer portal. This team probably did about as well as anyone in the country in the transfer portal. They're going to have, I think, 4 rotation players come from the transfer portal. So, grain of salt. But I keep seeing talk about this team as like top 4, top 5, like Final Four caliber. I just don't know if they're there yet. Top 25, like no question. Top 20, maybe top 15, like no question. Right there for second in the SEC and that next tier below South Carolina, like no question. But I just don't see it. I don't see it with this team being top 4. Like they haven't been in the top 15 of the Her Hoop Stats ratings since they had Andrea Carter and Isabel Harrison. Like it's been a long time. Like this program is not the same program as it was under Pat Summitt. This is not like the Candace Parker, the Tamika Catchings Tennessee program. And you're sensing a theme. Like all of my overrated and underrated are sort of just based on like what this program has been for the last 5, 6, 7 years. In college basketball, sometimes it changes, but in general, programs are kind of who they are under the same coach, right? And I think Tennessee right now under Kelly Harper is a top 25 team. That's kind of who they are. I don't think it's a Final Four team. I think it's a top 25 team. And if they prove me wrong, yeah, everyone come at me. But I'll believe the Final Four when I see it for this team.
Yeah, I think I kind of disagree with you on this one because I think I'm in the camp that they are a top 5 team this year. And I don't know if this is more about Tennessee or more just my opinion of where everyone else kind of stands at the moment. I don't know. I feel like I'm not high on many teams this season. Obviously, South Carolina is like their own little tier, and like I don't really know who can touch them this year. But then I think you look at the rest of it. You've got Stanford is in this top tier. I still think UConn's in that top group. Texas, in my opinion, is probably a top 5 team, and then I think Tennessee is next. I don't know who I put ahead of Tennessee, kind of going down that top 5.
All right. Well, as long as we're disagreeing, I'll go on record and say that I would have Iowa over Tennessee, which. I know you're very low on Iowa, and so I wish they played. I wish they played. We could just settle this on the court.
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation because I feel like they're so different teams too. That would just be an interesting matchup. You've got Iowa that plays no defense and all they rely on is offense, and then you've got Tennessee, which like their offense definitely struggles from time to time, but they are a really strong defensive program. That always makes for an interesting matchup.
Yeah, well, and the other aspect too is that Iowa loves to shoot the 3. Obviously, they're very perimeter-oriented, very transition-oriented. And Tennessee loves to grind it out in the paint. They love to get those, rebounds, block shots. They throw bigs on bigs on bigs at you. So yeah, you're right. The contrast in styles if these two teams played would be extremely entertaining. And regardless of who won, I would love to see the matchup. But if they played right now, neutral floor, I would pick Iowa. Obviously, you would pick Tennessee. So hopefully we get it in the tournament. Maybe we can go back.
Yeah.
Maybe we see these two teams play in the tournament, and maybe we can settle this debate on the court.
Yeah, I would love to see that matchup at some point. I'm going to challenge you on it a little bit more, though. Who else would you see being like ahead of Tennessee if you're talking about like top 5 teams in the country right now?
Top 5 team? Well, definitely Texas.
Yeah.
You brought up Texas. I would put Louisville up there ahead of Tennessee. Well, in the first 3 you said, sorry, South Carolina, UConn, Stanford. I think those are, even without Paige Beckers, almost givens, still ahead of Tennessee. I put Louisville ahead of there. So that's 5 right there to knock Tennessee out. I agree with you. The NC State is a little bit overrated. I think they're going to be ranked up there, but I probably wouldn't have them there. You're putting me on the spot now. I got to look
I know. Sorry, I didn't prep you for this one. I'm just curious.
No. So yeah, that's 5 right there. But I'd also put Iowa, like I said, ahead of Tennessee. I might have Iowa right around 6th or 7th. Maybe 6th is a little bit high. I don't think it's as high as what maybe probably you think it is. But either way, ahead of Tennessee, even if they're 7th or 8th. I'd probably have Iowa State ahead of them, and I think I'd have Notre Dame ahead of Tennessee, just to name a few more. But yeah, my top 5 would be, those top 3 you said, and then Texas and probably Louisville. So, and I don't think Tennessee is particularly close, in my opinion.
Fair.
I think the ranking should start with a 1. I'll say that.
Okay. We will see on that one. I think that's it's going to be an interesting one. I still think they have stuff to figure out on offense. And if they can't figure it out, I don't know how you be a Final Four team if you can't score. But I think they have the potential and they have the talent to be a top 5 type team this year.
They have the ceiling. Definitely they have the top 5 ceiling. I just don't think they're gonna hit it.
That's fair. All right. What else do I have on my list? I have full conference takes. They're not even really underrated, overrated. They're just things I wanted to say that didn't fit anywhere else. So I'm like, no.
Well, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, Oklahoma on my list of teams that are probably a little underrated coming into this season. I think a team that brings back a lot from a pretty solid team last year, but then I also just have this note that it's the year that Baylor finally does not win the Big 12 title, and I feel pretty confident on that one, and mostly in that Texas is probably going to win it, but between Texas, Iowa State, Oklahoma, I think this is the year that Baylor does not win the Big 12 title.
No, yeah, I mean, we were having this conversation last year that it might be the year, and they were so close. Iowa State was right there. They just, couldn't get over that hump. But you're right. I don't think Baylor's the favorite. I think Texas is the favorite. Big 12 is just so much better, though, than it was 2 years ago. Yes. Some of these new coaches they brought in. Even without Ayoka Lee, who's going to miss the season. Thoughts with her, Kansas State. It's so much of a deeper league, and there's so many more losses on your schedule than there used to be. So I agree with that. I wouldn't pick Baylor to win the Big 12.
Yeah, I agree, though. It's been nice to see the Big 12. Big 12 was one of the most fascinating leagues in the country last season. And I think it's been a long time since we said that. It's kind of been Baylor on an island for a long time.
Yeah, Baylor would have every now and then one challenger maybe step up. Last year they had 5. I mean, yeah, we talked about Texas and Iowa State. Kansas wasn't a challenger at the top of the Big 12, but they made the tournament after, how many years were they just at the bottom of the Big 12, like a doormat, and now they're significantly on the upswing. It's a good league. It's a fun league.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fun again this year. The Ayoka Lee thing is a big blow, but I still think it's going to be a fun. It's such a bummer, but it's still going to be a really good league and worth watching.
Yeah, absolutely.
The last thing I have on my list is not even a take. It's just a question. It just says Pac-12 with a question mark, and more just about how do we feel about the Pac-12 this year? Because I don't know how I feel about the Pac-12 this year. I mean, obviously we've talked about Stanford. Stanford's going to be great, but the rest of the Pac-12, it feels like it's just a big question mark to me. When you think about the Oregons, the Arizonas, the UCLAs of the world, I don't know what to expect from those teams.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think Oregon has a really high ceiling and a lowish floor, not they missed the tournament floor or anything like that, but they really will need Tahina Pau and Sedona Prince to to carry a pretty big load, I think, if Oregon's going to be a top tier team. Arizona, I think, is getting to the point where it's another one of those programs that I talk about where they're just going to be who they are. They're going to be like the 20th best team in the country, and that's who they are. So maybe, a little bit less of a question mark with them. But then some teams that took a big step last year, I think like Utah came out of obscurity and made the tournament last year. But then they lost a lot. They lost a couple transfers. Talked about Brenna Maxwell to Gonzaga, and there's another one who I'm going to talk about in a bit. But we'll see if Utah continues to, if it was kind of a one-off fluke, or if they can stay at that level, make the tournament again. So yeah, a lot of question marks in this league. You're right. I don't think Stanford winning is that big of a question mark, though. I think because there's so many question marks below them, I think it's Stanford's league again.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a kind of a runaway for Stanford. I think we've seen the Pac-12 be one of the more like interesting leagues at the top in the past few seasons, and I feel like we're falling back a little bit away from that this year. And well, of course, like part of the Pac-12 is leaving is it after this year that UCLA and USC move?
I don't even remember. It's either this year or next year. I can't remember. Yeah, man, I can't keep track all that stuff. Conferences are getting crazy.
But yeah, honestly, I was just trying to find a way to bring up UCLA, as everyone I'm sure has figured out, and didn't really have any place to put this on this list. I'm like too hesitant now to be like, oh, they're going to be good, because they've just struggled so much with injuries over the last few years. But I still do think it's a roster that has a lot of talent. That's probably, I'll say this, I think they're a roster that's getting like no respect as a potential top 25 program this year at this point. And I don't think they're going to be a highly ranked team, but I think they have like a ceiling that is like near the bottom of the top 25, could be a top 25 team this season.
Yeah, no, they definitely have that ceiling. I'm picturing you like going through all your notes and all the questions, and you get to the end and like, didn't put UCLA anywhere. Wait, where can I put them? Like,
this is my catch-all section. If I can't fit it anywhere else, I'm just like, well, we're gonna find a way to talk about it in this section.
Megan's sections are like Final Four, All-Americans, overrated, underrated, and UCLA. Those are like the categories of topics that we need to cover.
Yes.
Before we move on from the Pac-12, though, just another team that I think is going to be in the mix, not with Stanford, but in the mix in terms of making the tournament and maybe in that 2 through 6 or whatever. However big that next group is Washington State. Charlie Ledger-Walker has been just like a stud for them the last couple of years, and obviously she's going to be carrying that team again. So really, really excited to see what they can do. They've come on strong. Kami Etheridge done a great job there, and I think they're going to be another tournament team.
Yeah, I agree. I think this league is lacking like the top 25 talent to some extent beyond Stanford, but I do think it still has a lot of tournament teams in it.
Yeah, this league screams to me like they're going to have half of the 7-10 and the 8-9 matchups.
Yeah.
Like all of those matchups
Yes.
are Pac-12 is going to have like a ton of teams that lose in the second round of the tournament to a 1 seed.
Yep. I would fully agree with that. They've got a lot of concentration in that area.
Yep.
Well, that's all for today's episode. Thanks again for listening. Make sure wherever you're listening to us, make sure to rate, like, and subscribe to the podcast, whether that be on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Also, make sure you're subscribing to the stats site over at herhoopstats.com. It's just $20 a year to subscribe, and we have all of your needs covered for both NCAA and WNBA stats. And subscribe to our free newsletter as well on Substack to get all of our best content directly to your inbox. Also, be sure you are following us on social media at Her Hoop Stats on all platforms. Thanks again for listening.